I want you to picture two men. They served in the same branch. They separated from the same post within 8 months of each other. Both had done over 20 years. Both had earned a pension. Both walked out of those gates thinking they understood what was waiting for them. 3 years later, I sat down with each of them at separate times. One of them was comfortable. He'd made certain decisions before he left the service that took him some effort to research and some patience to execute. And now those decisions were paying out exactly the way he'd mapped them. He wasn't wealthy. He was stable. He could see clearly where his money was coming from and where it was going, and none of it surprised him. The other one was calling me because he didn't understand what had happened. Not a financial catastrophe, nothing dramatic, just a persistent, growing feeling that something wasn't adding up the way it was supposed to. He sat at my kitchen table, and he had that look I recognized. A soldier who knows the mission is off but can't isolate the problem yet. The difference between them wasn't how much they'd saved. The difference was what each man had known about his retirement package before he left, and what the other one hadn't known to ask. I'm Ron Vickers, Master Sergeant, U.S. Army, retired. 2 retirements. This is what I learned the hard way. I'm not a financial advisor. What I share here is personal observation. What happened to me, what I watched happen to the people I served alongside. If you are a veteran or a spouse or someone approaching retirement age and trying to understand what's actually coming, subscribe to this channel. You are not supposed to navigate this alone. That was never how we operated. There's a contrast I've been watching for 6 years now at veteran transition programs, sitting across from soldiers who remind me of myself at that moment, standing at the gate with 20+ years behind them, thinking the hard part is finished. The contrast is between the soldiers who came into that transition knowing precisely what the transition required of them, and the soldiers who assumed that their service had already handled the hard work. I was the second kind, and what I want to do today is tell you what that cost, in specifics, in the kind of precision I spent 26 years applying to missions where imprecision had consequences. Because I have never told it this directly in public before, and I believe it's time. His name was Martinez. I first knew him as a specialist. By the time he came through the Transition Assistance Program at Fort Liberty, he was a Sergeant First Class with 22 years of service. Sharp man. The kind of soldier who gave briefings that wasted nothing. No extra words, no vague language, just the information in the order you needed it to make a decision. He sat across from me at the transition assistance table with a folder in front of him that he'd organized carefully, the way a precise person organizes anything that matters. He asked me the question that I had once asked myself. What's the right way to handle the pension? He had been told he could begin receiving his military retirement benefits immediately. He was 44 years old. He had a family, a house, a plan to go home to Texas for a few months before figuring out what came next. He'd been carrying a lot for 22 years, and the idea of some time without a mission to report to, not forever, just for a season, made complete sense to him. He'd earned it. That was the phrase he used, and he was right. He had earned it. I paused before I answered. Not to be dramatic about it. I paused because I was sitting at that table, and I could see myself across from me, 14 years ago, at my own transition moment. And I remembered with precision what I had known and what I had not known, and the distance between those two things still bothers me when I sit with it long enough. I told him, I made the same decision you're describing, and 3 years after I made it, I finally understood what it actually meant. Let me tell you what I learned. 26 years in the Army. I went in as a private in 1983 and came out as a Master Sergeant in 2009. 26 years of mission, of structure, of waking up every day inside a system that told me precisely what I was supposed to do and why it mattered and who was depending on me to do it correctly. I had health coverage that I had never once had to think about. I had a chain of command that organized my days and gave my decisions weight. I had colleagues who'd known me for a decade or more and who treated what I said as carrying authority earned through shared experience. I had purpose that was assigned and structured and came with clear accountability. 26 years of mission, 18 years of purpose. Then the calendar ran out. When I left in 2009, I understood intellectually that I would miss those things. I said that to people who asked. I had watched other soldiers go through transitions, and I thought I understood from the outside what the transition involved. I was incorrect in the way that you are always incorrect about something until you are inside it. I had mentally cataloged the things I would miss, without truly accounting for what those things had been providing me that I wasn't going to get from anywhere else automatically. The first category of things I had to learn the hard way, and I want to say clearly that I am not going to give anyone financial advice or tax advice because that is not what I am and not what this channel is, was the relationship between what my retirement income looked like on the documentation I'd been given and what it looked like in practice when combined with other income. When I took a part-time consulting role in the first year after leaving, and then later when I took the county job, I was receiving income from multiple sources simultaneously. What I had not been adequately briefed on, not because anyone was hiding it from me, but because I had not known to ask the right questions, was how those income streams looked in combination at the end of a tax year. What the government sees when it looks at all of your income from every source is a single picture, and that picture may look quite different from the individual streams that compose it. Nobody sat me down before I separated and said, "Here are all the income streams you will have. Here is how they interact with each other when the IRS constructs its picture of your total income. Here are the categories of question you need to ask before you take your first distribution from anything." That briefing did not happen. I have been told by veterans at the transition program that this is common, that the transition counseling addresses many things carefully, and this particular category gets less attention than it deserves. I believe that to be true based on what I've observed. I'm not saying it as criticism of the system. I'm saying it because it's what I needed someone to say to me plainly, and no one said it. What I eventually understood about my own situation, and this is personal to me and I am not describing anyone else's situation, is that I had made certain assumptions about what my monthly income would look like and what I would keep from it. And those assumptions had been formed by looking at individual streams rather than the combined picture. The gap between my assumption and reality wasn't enormous, but it was persistent and it was consistent, and it took me longer than it should have to understand where it was coming from. Now let me tell you about the second retirement, because I believe the second retirement is the one that people don't prepare for, and I think it is the harder one. After the Army, I took a position as Emergency Management Director for a county in North Carolina. I was there for 18 years. Some people, when I describe this, hear the job after the Army and understand it as a supplement, something that filled time and added income while the real retirement played out in the background. That is not what it was. What it was, which I only understood fully when it ended, was a second complete structure. It gave me almost everything the Army had given me in terms of daily architecture, a defined role with clear expectations, colleagues who depended on my expertise and treated my decisions as authoritative, a schedule organized around external requirements rather than my own choices, health coverage for myself and my wife Patrice that I had never once had to calculate into a monthly budget because it had always been provided, a purpose that was genuine. Emergency management is not abstract work, and the years I spent in that role doing real work for real communities gave me something I don't diminish by calling it the second mission. When I retired from the county in 2021, all of that went away simultaneously. Not one thing at a time, which would have been manageable in the way that losing one leg of a table at a time would give you some warning before the table fell. All at once. The structure, the coverage, the purpose, the external accountability, the colleagues, the reason to be somewhere at 7 in the morning, gone at once. And I was not prepared for what it felt like to wake up on a Monday in January with nothing structurally required of me by anyone. Nobody warned me the second one was the real one. I had spent 15 years watching other veterans go through the military to civilian transition, and I had thought I understood what retirement looked like. I had thought the hard transition was the Army one. I had been wrong because I had not accounted for the fact that the county job had been doing for me what the Army had done, providing a structure I didn't have to build myself. When the county job ended, the structure ended, and I was not prepared to build a new one from scratch at 61 years old, without a mission to report to. The financial piece of the second retirement was also harder than the first, in ways I want to name directly. When I had separated from the Army, I had my pension beginning, and then the county salary on top of it, and the combination was comfortable enough that I hadn't had to look hard at the picture. When the county retirement started, and I had 3 income streams, military pension, county pension, and Social Security approaching on the near horizon, the picture had become more complex. The total I was working with looked adequate, but the IRS's picture of what I had, constructed from all three sources, was different from the picture I had in my head when I was thinking about what I'd have to live on monthly. That gap between the income you think you have and the income you actually keep was something I had to learn by experiencing it directly, because nobody had mapped it for me in advance. I want to say something about this without turning it into advice, because I am genuinely not in a position to give anyone advice about their specific situation. What I observed in my own case and in the cases of veterans I've worked with at the transition program is that the surprise at tax time is almost never about anything exotic. It's not about unusual circumstances. It's about the everyday combination of ordinary income streams that each individually seemed clear and predictable, adding up to a picture that the government sees differently than the individual sees it. The veterans who navigated this well were the ones who had asked, before leaving service, specifically and precisely, how will all of these sources of income interact at the end of a tax year? What questions should I be asking? Who knows this terrain and can walk me through it? My friend Torres is the example I keep coming back to. We served together at Fort Bragg starting in 1994. He separated 2 years after I did. He spent about 60 days before separation working with a veterans benefits counselor, not a financial advisor, just someone who knew the specific terrain of military transition, who walked him through every piece of his package and helped him understand in advance what the combined picture would look like. He came out of that transition with a clarity about his own situation that I did not have about mine. 3 years after I was feeling the persistent gap between what I'd expected and what I actually kept, Torres was in a different position entirely. Not because he had more than me, because he understood earlier and more precisely what he had. The structural piece of the second retirement was the one that ultimately cost me more than the financial piece, because the financial piece had solutions once I understood the problem, and the structural piece took longer. When I say structural, I mean the daily architecture of purpose and accountability and role that retirement removed. What helped me, and I want to say this as personal observation, not as prescription, was the decision to stop waiting for the structure to be provided and to build it deliberately. The transition program I volunteer at every week. This channel where I come back consistently and try to tell the truth about what this period looks like. The morning routine I built because I needed to wake up knowing what I was supposed to do, even if what I was supposed to do was something I'd chosen rather than something assigned. What didn't help was the period before that decision. The months when I was waiting for civilian retirement to organize itself around me, the way the Army had organized itself around me for 26 years. It doesn't work that way. Civilian retirement provides nothing by default. You have to build everything you want to have. I went back to the table at Fort Liberty and I looked at Martinez. He was still holding his folder and he had that quality that good soldiers have when they are actually listening. Completely still, not fidgeting, not planning his response while I was still talking. He was receiving the information. I told him, the pension is real and it is earned, and you deserve to receive it. The decision about when and how to take things should be made with precise information, not general assumptions, and you should get that precision before you leave rather than after. I told him the structure he'd had for 22 years was not going to be provided by civilian life, and building a structure that was genuinely his own was going to require as much deliberate effort as any mission he'd planned. I told him health coverage, when you've had it provided your entire adult career, becomes visible and expensive the first day you have to calculate it yourself. I told him the transition from a second career, if he went on to one, which I suspected he would, was going to be harder than the transition he was making right now, not easier, and to plan for it now rather than later. And I told him, the second retirement is the real one. Nobody warned me. I'm warning you. He wrote that down. He folded the page of his legal pad over and wrote it at the top of the next page. Good soldiers write down what matters and file it. I watched him do it and I thought about all the things I would have written down if someone had said them to me. 26 years of mission, 18 years of purpose. Then the calendar ran out. And on the other side of that calendar, I found something that took me a while to locate, but that I believe is real. The slow, deliberate work of building a life whose structure I chose, rather than inherited. That work is harder than anything the Army issued to me. It may also be the most important thing I've done. The jury is still out on that. But I come back to this table every week because I believe it matters, and because the mission I'm on now, telling the truth about what this transition actually requires, is one I wish someone had been on when I was sitting where Martinez was sitting. I want to hear from you in the comments. Not about numbers, not about strategies. I want to know, what was your biggest battle in the retirement transition? Not the financial one, the personal one, the structural one, the one that surprised you. Write it down because someone else is going to read it and recognize themselves in it. And that recognition is part of what this channel is for. Subscribe if you haven't. Every week, one more honest conversation about what this actually looks like. You've put in the years. You deserve the truth about what comes after them. See you next time.